we move towards the end. Thank you. As we move towards the end of the year, so we won't keep you waiting too long. But hopefully you're here for the exciting new open call for proposals from ECW, focused on strengthening support to teachers. I know it's an issue you all care very deeply about, so we're really excited to be with you today. This really is an orientation webinar. Really, we want to just give you a bit more of an overview of the TOR, the call for proposals, but really also open it up for your questions. We know there might be lots of questions you have as you prepare your expressions of interest, and we want to do our best to respond to those. This webinar should have taken place yesterday. We had a huge tech issue, which we can only apologise for. And as I say, we're really grateful that you could make it today, and thank you for your patience and understanding. We are recording the webinar and we'll share that with you. And we are also going to prepare a Q&A document afterwards based on your questions, which we'll also make available. So hopefully you'll have plenty of resources available. And you can, of course, always contact us using that RFP email, which we'll share again later today. So thank you all for being here. My name's Charlotte. I manage the acceleration facility here at ECW, and I'm delighted to be joined by brilliant colleagues and teacher specialists from the education and M&E teams, Fatu and Kali, who will be speaking shortly. And just to say, behind the scenes, we always also have brilliant colleagues, Paul, our wonderful intern, and Mumu in New York. So thank you both for everything you're doing behind the scenes. But I think without further ado, let's get started. We've got colleagues all over the world and we want to be mindful of your time. So if we go to the next slide, Paul, I'll just give you a quick overview of what we'll talk about today. So we're going to do a quick introduction and framing, just really for those perhaps less familiar with ECW, and perhaps just a chance to remind everyone why we care so deeply about this issue. We will give that overview of the TOR. We know there's quite a lot in there, so this is perhaps a chance for us to go through that with you all and talk through what it is exactly that we're looking for, what we're hoping to achieve with this work. Then we'll recap the timeline and the next steps, sort of the practical pieces of this. But really, as I say, the majority of the time we want to use for questions. We want to give the floor to all of you to be able to raise your questions. So what I would love to happen while we're presenting, please you can use the Q&A function or the chat to raise your questions. I'll collate those during the presentation, and then when we go to the Q&A, we'll be able to pose those to the panel, and hopefully you'll get all the information you need. But thank you for your interest. Thank you for being here. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Fatu to kick things off. Fatu, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Charlotte. And thank you all for joining the webinar, and for forgiving us for the glitch yesterday. It was major, but hopefully we can get past that and start it. I will start just this presentation by explaining who are we with ECW. Most of you know, but it's good that also we refresh the memory and know what the organization is about. ECW is the UN Global Fund for Education in Emergencies and Protracted Crises, and it's actually the only global fund who has that mandate within that space. And over the last couple of years, ECW was created in 2016, and up till now, we have raised as a fund $1.6 billion for children in countries around the world, and precisely we have reached 44 countries. And the plan for our strategic plan that is ending in 2026 is to reach up to 20 million children by 2026. So this is what the fund is. And then next slide, please. How does ECW get its funding to the grantees and to the children? I would just explain our funding window, because I don't know, some of you again are not familiar with it. The first funding window that ECW has is the first emergency response, so FER. The FER is for ECW this funding that is more pure classic emergency, and it is a funding that we will use when there's an immediate emergency happening, or the escalation of a current emergency. So that would be typically what's happening right now in Gaza, what's happening in Haiti with the gang violence. So that where we will intervene with a first emergency response. And the fund for that, the fair is around, the bracket will be around 2 to 6 million, and it's a quick funding that we have to disburse within 8 weeks, and it is usually last from 12 to 18 months. That will be our first funding window to grantees. The second one is the MERP, Multi-Year Resilience Program, and the MERP is more our funding for protracted crises, meaning that the crisis has been happening and is lasting longer than foreseen. So in that case, we will fund a bigger program to allow the countries and the children to have more predictable funding. And that funding will work both on emergency, but trying to work around the nexus and support sustainability and development. And for the MERP, the funding bracket is between 10 to 20 million. Usually we have smaller MERP, bigger MERP, but that will be the bracket for MERP. And the last window of funding for ECW is the acceleration facility, and that is the reason why we are here today. And Charlotte will talk more about it later. But this one is more, it's a small fund, but it is what ECW uses to really learn from what's happening in the emergency space, learn, innovate, and fund organization that can create global public goods for the space of teachers in emergency and protracted crisis. So these are our three funding windows, and today we are going to talk more specifically about the acceleration facility in which the teacher RFP is in. Next. So what are our commitment as ECW to teachers? As I was saying from the beginning, ECW was created in 2016, and since the beginning, it has had this big commitment on teachers, knowing that they are the backbone of education systems, and all FAIR and MERP in ECW have some component of teacher. It is either teacher incentive, teacher recruitment, training, agency, retention, but we have been working a lot on teachers. And our strategic plan also has committed to improve the support given to teachers and help resolve the policy barrier affecting teachers in emergencies. And within our commitment to teacher, we don't want to buck all the teachers in one, because teachers are different. So we have the commitment within that to have teachers, female teachers, and specific intervention toward female teachers, and specific intervention also on inclusion with teachers who have handicap or teachers with disability. Next. And since 2016, ECW has reached around 100,000 teachers in the emergency and protracted crisis, and only in 2023 we have reached 25,000 teachers, which really will show you how we are working on this component of education in ECW. Now, the whole point of the RFP is to really try to understand how we can do better in our programming. What are the innovation? What is working? What is not working? So that we really can now take this teacher issue forward and have policies that can help teacher well-being and teacher retention. So that's why we are here. And thank you so much. I will give it back to Charlotte.
Thanks, Fatou. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a sense of sort of the real commitment behind this from ECW. So now let's turn our attention to the call for proposals itself. So as Fatou says, the acceleration facility it's quite unique for us. You know, that a lot of our work is through the country programs that Fatou described, the FERS and MERPs. But the AF, as we call it, the acceleration facility, it allows us to do things a little differently. It allows us to sort of take back, look at the sector as a whole, and really support strategic initiatives that are sort of trying to address systemic barriers. And we know teachers face systemic barriers in EIEP settings across the globe. And it allows us to sort of think of more catalytic changes that we can try and make as a fund with our wonderful partners. And that we hope will help then strengthen sort of these collective efforts. As I say, I know seeing you all and introduce yourselves in the chat. We know you're all working on these issues and grappling with them as well. So we hope this type of funding helps us all to sort of unlock some of the key changes that are needed. And because of that, we really want our partners to think ambitiously, think innovatively as they do this work. So it's sort of quite different from the sort of more traditional programming or that we're supporting in other ways, but it allows us to think of the sector more generally. And so it's a really important way for us to advance those big commitments we have to teachers and that we've made in the strategic plan that Fatu mentioned. If we just go to the next slide then, so just a reminder that this open call for proposals, this request for proposals, as I say, it's focused on tackling those systemic barriers that teachers face in emergencies and protracted crises. I'm just going to, before I pass to colleagues to go into the detail of what's in this TOR, I'm just going to summarise some of the key things to remember about this open call. So if we go to the next slide again, so very practically, so just a reminder that the budget for this is 2.2 million total USD. A couple of questions that have come in about that. So just a reminder, it's 2.2 million total, and that is over 3 years. We feel like 3 years is really needed to sort of unlock the change and achieve the change we're trying to with this. So that's the value over 3 years. Now, a couple of you have asked about this as well. We really are looking for a consortium of partners for this work. There are a few reasons for that. One, I think, is as you'll have seen in the TOR, there are a lot of different work streams in this particular TOR that require different skill sets, different experience, different mandates even. So we feel like a consortium would allow us to bring together partners with that mix of skill sets. So that's why we're hoping that you're looking for your consortium partners and sort of seeing that strength in a consortium. Of course, perhaps there is an organisation out there that is uniquely placed to bring all these pieces together, but we anticipate that it would likely be a consortium that's in a stronger position to apply to deliver across the work. Having said that, very practically, it's important to note that there will need to be a clear consortium lead. And that consortium lead is the one who will enter into the contracting with ECW. They are the ones who need to follow those eligibility requirements, the UN assessment piece that's in the TOR. It's the consortium lead. They'll be the ones that we have the grant confirmation agreement with and transfer the funds to. Now, of course, we expect that lead grantee will have their own rigorous processes in place for any sub-granting and with their consortium partners. But we would have that direct contracting with the lead. But of course, we would look forward to collaborating with the consortium as a whole. As I say then, in terms of what we're trying to achieve here, there are 3 connected and phased work streams, which we'll look at in a second. And it's really thinking about supporting teachers at these different levels in the system. But I just wanted to flag 2 really important things as you're developing your expressions of interest across these work streams. We really sort of passionately believe in the importance of elevating teachers' voices and empowering teachers. So we'd really love to see that approach cut across your work. And we know lots of important work around that is happening in the sector. So that would be really important for us to see. Similarly, we really want to make sure this work upholds our commitments on gender and gender transformation. And so we really want to see that angle around female teachers and the unique barriers they face also come through across these 3 work streams. So just some things to keep in mind before we go into the detail of the work streams. Another thing I'd like to point out is the focus on emergencies and protracted crises. Again, we know that a huge amount of work is going on to support the teacher workforce more broadly. Lots of important work happening in development settings, but ECW's mandate is very specifically on emergencies and protracted crises and reaching the most vulnerable learners and young people in those settings. So because of that, there is a very specific focus. So we do need to see that EIEPC lens throughout. And that's where the alignment with our priority countries come in. Now, we feel we didn't make that very clear in the TOR, so we've done some work and we'll share it with you today to make that a bit clearer. And Fatu and Carly will speak to you about that shortly. That's hopefully, if you have questions about focus countries, we'll talk about that today. But it really is, that alignment with the countries that in ECW's portfolio. And lastly, but not least, a couple of people have asked, are we looking to focus on a particular profile of teachers? And actually, we want to recognise that in EIE settings, there are a range of different teacher profiles that all need our attention and support. So we just want to recognise that, and often that will depend on the context. So it will depend on how this work develops and evolves. But we really want to note that there are these different teacher profiles who have different needs. And so, just by way of example, teachers with disabilities, female teachers, refugee teachers. So again, just want to make sure that the expression of interest sort of recognises that and understands that as part of their ways of working. So those are sort of the key considerations for the RFP. And now I'll just quickly give you an overview of the work streams. We keep talking about these work streams that the consortium would deliver, and they sort of cut across the global and country level. And Fatou and Carly are shortly going to talk you through these in more detail. But just to say, hopefully you saw in the TOR that the first step is a background report. I feel like that term doesn't really do it justice, but I think our thinking here is we know a lot of work is happening in the sector and we don't want to duplicate that. We really want to think about our value add. So through that work, we'll be able to synthesize all the evidence that's out there, as well as promising practices, data from our own programs, consultation, etc., to really give us a strong foundation for this work and really think about what ECW's value add is and recommendations for our work as a fund and what our role is and should be. So we see that as really foundational. The second work stream is where I think we hope a lot of the change will happen for teachers, and that's that country level system strengthening. And so we'll talk more about this, but this idea of working with the incredible partners in country who have the mandate to support teachers to really unlock some of the challenges. And that work would focus on a few particular countries, and we'll come to that. And then the third, but by no means least, is the global advocacy piece. And I think, I'm sure we're all aware that I know everyone on this call will be very committed to teachers and their fundamental role in EIEPC. But I think we all recognise that still in global dialogue, they're still often missing from the conversation. So we really do feel that there is a need for some global advocacy efforts. We're thinking of a sort of state of play report, but recognise that other advocacy projects may be needed. There may be opportunities, and look forward to hearing from you guys what that could and should look like to have the most impact. So these are the three work streams, but important to say we see them all as very connected, iterative and phased. And again, in the expression of interest, we'd love to see how you think those things can connect. Obviously the background report could then feed into what's happening at country level, but also that system strengthening work could then feed back and help strengthen the recommendations in the background report. So we do see it as very iterative. And again, I think that's why we think a consortium approach will be really effective here. And just a final reminder that, as I said, across these three, just elevating teacher voices and keeping in mind those strong commitments on gender will be really important. That's enough from me. That's enough of a summary. I really want to hand over now to Carly to take you into a little bit more detail and help unpack a bit what's in that TOR itself. So over to you, Carly, and keep the questions coming, everyone. We are tracking them. Thanks, Carly.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And just one thing to say before we really get into the meat of the work streams is that because we do envision this as being very iterative, we also recognize the need to be flexible throughout the process. We recognize that, this is right now, this is our best guess of how things are going to look like, but we really do look forward to co-creating this process with the grantees, are looking forward to your feedback. And so please, as you're developing your expressions of interest, this is our best guess, and we ask you to put forward your best vision for that, but we are very open to responding to your creativity in really shaping this proposal. So just to say, for workstream 1, as Charlotte mentioned, it is envisioned as a background report, which really covers 3 main pieces. So the first is that it would identify the unique challenges facing teachers in education emergencies and protracted crises with a specific lens on female teachers. The second piece is that it would summarize promising practices for addressing those challenges that teachers are facing. You can see at the bottom of the screen where you see the star, some of the specific things that we would be looking for in a successful proposal. So as you're developing this background report, identifying challenges and promising practices, we would really be looking for the grantee to use multiple methods to do so. So including in-country consultations with stakeholders, reviewing the literature that's out there, and also actually looking at ECW's own databases, our results databases, and bringing that together. And then an additional piece of that is that it's not just doing a review of the challenges and the promising practice, but it's actually synthesizing that in a way that is rigorous and replicable, but also that really brings together all these different types of information. So including, academic literature, quote unquote gray literature and reports, ECW's own databases, and all of this. So doing that in a way that is a bit more rigorous. And then the third piece is drawing on both of those to develop practical and actionable recommendations, including dedicated recommendations for female teachers. In terms of success criteria and what we're looking for in the expression of interest is really the demonstrated ability to communicate that evidence in a way that is meaningful to different stakeholders. And that includes both stakeholders within countries and also tailored to the ECW Secretariat as well. One important thing to note about this workstream is we are very aware about the emerging efforts that have been made to already start to synthesize some of the challenges and the promising practices out there. And the aim of this is not to be duplicative, but really to build on all that really great work that has been going on, but to extend it so that it really does incorporate the wide range of knowledge, the tacit knowledge, the gray literature that's out there, and then to really make sure it's usable by different audiences. Next slide, please. And so I see a number of questions coming into the chat about focus countries and what's envisioned for that. So hopefully the next few slides will give you a picture on that. For this work stream 1, we really do envision it as casting a broad net across all of ECW's MERP and AF focus countries. And you can see those listed here because part of the goal of that background report is really to influence, it's to influence both country stakeholders, but ECW Secretariat's own programming around teachers. So we do want to understand sort of that breadth that's going on across our portfolio. Next slide, please. Then moving into workstream 2, you're going from this broader level and thinking of it as more of like a funnel, narrowing in on a certain set of contexts. And we are currently envisioning this as being around 3 contexts to do this work. And actually, Paul, if you could go to the next slide first, and then I'll come back. But since the RFP has been released, we've been looking at our countries, looking at the timelines for when our programs are being renewed. And so at this point, we envision that workstream 2 will really focus on countries in the Sahel and in Eastern Africa. So Burkina Faso, Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Mali, Nigeria, South Sudan, and Sudan. And with that, back to the other slide, please. We anticipate that the goal of this work would be to really strengthen systems for teacher capacities, again, with a focus on female teachers, but to do that using 3 main strategies. So one is to convene and fund a learning community of country and regional partners. In that learning community, to bring those partners together to collaboratively identify challenges and then brainstorm, test, implement, re-brainstorm, test, and implement solutions. And using really the background report in order to do so, to build on that. And then the third piece on this is that this learning community would co-develop a monitoring framework and the measurement strategies so that at the end of the day, we can see both what has been learned within specific country contexts, but also across the different country contexts. In terms of the success factors for this work, really experience with country level systems strengthening and support of teachers, the ability to form partnerships and really a focus on partnerships that have the lens of equity in doing so. And then really deep experience in facilitating such learning communities. So we know that a lot of times in this, there's issues of power and privilege that arise. And so really looking in the expressions of interest for demonstrated experience in being able to very successfully manage this type of community. And with that, you can go 2 slides over, and I will turn it over to Fatu for workstream 3.
Thank you very much, Carly. Well, to add to what has been said for workstream 3, this is the workstream that will take a bit more time. So our expectation is for it to be delivered at the end of the RFP. The RFP is for 3 years, so that will be around 2027, where we will have now the end product of the RFP. That's workstream 3. So for workstream 3, what we are really envisioning is having an organization, part of the consortium, of course, develop and launch a global report on teachers and also advocacy products. The reason why we are looking for a global report on teachers in emergency settings and protracted crises is that we have seen there have been reports on teachers, of course, report also on refugees teachers, but we haven't had one global report bringing in refugee teachers, IDPs, and and having all of the emergency situations in one report, even linking to climate disasters. So what we will really like on this last product is to have one-stop shop groundbreaking report that really can show what has a sector-wide understanding of challenges and opportunities around the issue of teachers, teacher agency, teacher voice, and teacher well-being. And of course, and I will repeat again, we really want also that to always have section on female teachers and inclusion and teacher with disability, because that is one of our part of ECW mandate and very important to ECW to always bring those difficulties and issues forward in everything we do, particularly in this subject. The second objective of this work stream and of this report is now, once we have all what has been happening in the sector, and we will now have some data analysis to add to it. So we want to have a report that is very strong, that use the data of what has been done before, what are the best practices. It can use the background report that was done at the beginning, can use the country example that we have, and also all of the what's happening in the space. So it's not only workstream 3 is of course on the countries that ECW is targeting, but it could be even forward outside of that on anything that has happened in emergency with teachers. That's very important to have that report be backed by analysis, data, and case study in recommendation. And then with that, we would like to have some advocacy for teachers, advocacy for the prioritization. This is so hard. And professionalization of teachers, and having that advocacy on also teacher voices, because nothing can be done with teachers without teachers, or for teachers without teachers. So look at how we can advocate at country level with donors, with different type of audience, to really put these issues forward and see what is the best practices and how us ECW, but all the donor community and government can move the needle forward. This is basically what workstream 3 will do, and that is mostly at the end of the other work streams, so that we can build on those. And for success factors, or the organization that we want to do that, is we would prefer to have an organization that has a mandate for global report, because well, it's a global report, and we want to have that audience, we want to have that reach, and we want to have that impact. So it would be great to have organizations that have already done those global report on teachers, or at least on education, that can take this vision forward. And the organization has to have expertise on the subject, and innovative approaches that we can show, and some strategy of advocacy. The advocacy can be done through conferences, through workshop with governments, through country engagement, with donor engagement, but it is a bit of a whole package for this work stream, and hopefully the grantees or the consortium will have enough time to finalize this and really get us where we want to go on this report. I think I will answer later on question, but this is pretty much the 3 work stream, and over to you, Charlotte.
Thanks so much, Fatu. And I think this is just a reminder of the full list of those countries that are relevant. To that global advocacy report, we'll be able to speak to all of these and the challenges teachers are facing across these contexts, as Fatu says. And we will provide these lists on the website, these updated information. Great. Okay, so perhaps now we've gone into a bit more detail about the streams of work. We'll just quickly do the practical things, and then we will turn our attention to the questions that you've been raising. Thank you for sharing those. Do keep those coming. So just very quickly, hopefully you've seen them that the first step is the expression of interest. And there's 2 documents that you'll need to submit. One is the sort of expression of interest itself, the narrative proposal, and then one is the budget. And if you attach those and submit those to the RFP email address, we look forward to reviewing them. The good news is, given our technical issues yesterday and given the holiday season is approaching, we are going to extend the deadline slightly, which we hope eases the pressure on colleagues somewhat. We haven't announced this yet on the website or on social media, but we will soon. We're pushing it to Thursday, January 30th, just to hopefully give you a little bit more time. So hopefully that will be helpful. I thought that might be a question coming in on the chat and it hasn't yet, so maybe we've preempted it. The templates for that expression of interest are on the website, and we'll put the link in the chat again for you all with that information. And hopefully you've got the email address, but you can see it just up there if not. And just for your information, so the successful expressions of interest will be shortlisted, and then they will be invited to an interview. And we feel the interview stage is important for this work, given it's very iterative, different work streams. It's an opportunity for us to meet together and to discuss this work. So if you're successful and you're shortlisted, you would be invited to interview to present your plans and discuss them with Secretariat colleagues. And then the very final step would be that full proposal. So that would go into more detail. It will include things like the results framework and the risk assessments, but you don't need to be worrying about that at this stage. Thanks for that, Paul. So just the practicalities, and do keep that new deadline in your minds. So we're going to shift in a second to the Q&A portion, but before we do, we anticipate that the 2 sort of most common questions we may get if we go to the next slide sort of what slightly intangible in some ways, but what would an effective consortia look like, and what would a quality proposal include? So perhaps to start on the consortia, and hopefully it's become clear why we're looking for a consortia, but it's really about being able to combine the different areas of strength and expertise and a mandate, country focus, etc. And so hopefully in your expression of interest, really try and get that across, that you bring these different skill sets together. I think something we really believe at ECW is sort of that, the power of the collective, and it's just sort of another example of that. Another, I think, key thing for the consortia will be the ability to develop partnerships sort of beyond that consortium itself, to engage the different actors and audiences, because this is delivering at different levels. That work stream 2, that country focused work, we will need to be working closely with in-country partners, for example. So being able to form those partnerships. And as Carly said, being conscious of things about power dynamics, equity, and so on. And then lastly, as I say, sort of speaks to the same point, but understanding the different and specific mandates involved in this work. This is looking at system strengthening. And so it's really understanding who has the responsibility, the mandate in different areas, and how can we work with and through those organisations. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour. And then in terms of what a quality proposal will do, I think ultimately we need to see strong methodology for each work stream. We're conscious some organisations may have strengths in certain areas, but we really need to see it across the 3. We really hope that you'd be able to demonstrate that sort of understanding and plan for that phased iterative nature of this work. And lastly, as we mentioned a couple of times, upholding those cross-cutting pieces about teacher voice and about the gender lens. So that's some thinking. I may just bring in Fatu and Carly for any additional reflections they wanted to share on sort of success criteria. And also, Carly, do you want to mention the form you put together?
Sure. So we recognize that some people might already have existing partnerships in mind. Some people are more, looking at this and seeing, hey, I might be a good fit for work stream 1 and 2, but maybe not 3. So we did want to provide an opportunity for those who are interested to basically sign up in a list, provide a little bit of information about your organization, what work streams you would be particularly interested in, what skills you and expertise you really bring to the table. And if you sign up in this, it's a Google form, we would share it with those who have signed up, only those signed up, and sort of that gives your consent that others can reach out to you if you want to talk about the proposal, if you want to try and form partnerships and things like that. So we'll share the link to that Google form at the end of the webinar.
Thanks so much, Carly. And Fatu, anything you want to add around the sort of success criteria piece?
Thank you. Well, one thing that I want to add, I mean, for workstream 1 and 3, all the countries of ECW are eligible where we intervene, plus even countries where we don't intervene that have emergency are eligible. But for workstream 2, as you could see, it's a very small set of country. And then what we would like, one of the success criteria is, even though most of the country are in Africa, having some diversity of zones, francophone, anglophone countries, or east, west, that would be really also interesting to have as a work stream, because that will help us a bit look at the difference and similarity on how teacher issues are managed at political level, at TIMIS, etc. So having some diversity within that would be really important. And also, because of workstream 3 being really country focused, and meaning that we have grantees already in those countries that are managing either MERPs, offer, or both. We will need the organization to be able to intervene at country level, which means that whatever consortium you has to be able to implement directly, work with teachers, work with the government, work with the teacher training institute within the country. So one of the success factor would be to make sure that you have actual capacity to work in the field that you have proposed and chosen. That's all. Over to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Fatu. Okay, so let's move to the Q&A part now, and a lot of questions have been coming in. I may just jump in quickly with a practical one that colleagues have asked about HACT assessment. So yeah, there are various eligibility criteria for us to be able to enter into the grant agreements. You don't need to worry about that at the expression of interest stage. So there's no expectation that you need to do a HACT assessment before the expression of interest. If you're the successful grantee, that is something that we as ECW can support you with. It does take some time, so we'd need to factor that into your work planning if successful. But yeah, please know that these sort of practical things around the pre-assessments, we can work with the successful grantee to have those in place. Great. Okay, lots of questions. Fatu and Carly, Paul, perhaps let's stop sharing screen so we can see more of the panelists. There's a question around the budget, Fatu and Carly, around, do we have expected amounts for different work streams? How do we see the funds being divided up? Do one of you want to come in on
that? Sure, I can try. So I think we really envision the bulk of that funding going to workstream 2, recognizing that there is a request to convene and fund in-country partners in these 3 countries, and recognizing that set of work will probably both involve the most resources and be the longest time. And so potentially, lower proportion dedicated to work streams 1 and 3, but again, open to your proposals, and that's just our sense of things at the moment.
Thanks, Carly. So yeah, we haven't set anything in stone and really look to you for your assessment as you develop the EOI, but I think we do recognise that country level work will likely need majority of the resources. Thanks so much, Carly. Great. So I think there is still some confusion around country selection. So I think maybe it would be worth us spending a little bit of time on that. And maybe we can pull the maps back up. Just to say again, colleagues, we realise this wasn't clear in the TOR, so we are going to be today updating the TOR and making it clearer. I think the first thing to say is that, as colleagues have said, workstream 1, that background report, and workstream 3, that global advocacy, we want that to really speak to the sector broadly, to EIEPC broadly. And so that's why for those workstream, we've listed all the countries where ECW are active through our multi-year resilience programs. So it's quite a comprehensive list for those two, because the work itself is more comprehensive. Where things get narrower is that second work stream, that country focused work. Paul, sorry to put you on the spot. Do you think you would be able to share the map of the 8 countries where the more focused work would take place? And then Fatu and Carly, do you mind coming in again and perhaps explaining this, because I think there's quite a bit of confusion.
Yes, for workstream 2, yes, I understand the confusion, because at the beginning, when we were setting up the RFP, we had put all our MERP that I just now validated. So the one of 2024 and the one that we expect to start in 2025. And the whole point was that whoever is a grantee who is going to work at country level with our grantees at country level will then be able to work on a new program and then bulk up a bit the teacher component of the program. Every program has a teacher component, but it's not as big as what will be coming from this work stream. But then when we thought about it, then we realized that it was very broad. There was many countries in it. Some countries we are phasing out of, or some countries the renewal is not clear, the timeline in 2025, and then we don't want the consortium then to find themselves proposing a country and then we validate it and then the MERP doesn't start until 2026 and delaying the work. So we had to make that narrowing down effort. So also help the potential consortium to know where to go instead of making it way too broad. And these are now the countries where we really want to have 3 of them at least to have country focused work. So this is for work stream 2, which is the country work. The rest is more global report and background report that will touch all the countries in emergency where we work in. I hope that's clear. Over to you, Charlotte.
Just to say one thing, because I just saw a question come in the chat. Must you work in all 8 countries or just in a few? No, for workstream 2, we anticipate the work would be in around 3 countries. So please do feel free to propose those or narrow that down in your expression of interest. That would be helpful.
Thanks both. So hopefully that's a little bit clearer now, colleagues. But if it is still unclear, we have developed a one-pager that will be added to the TOR today, which we hope will make it clearer. And I think the reason we feel like there'll be an important point after the background report to discuss this with the ECW Secretariat, as colleagues said, is just to really recognise that in the background report there may be findings that influence the countries that you want to work in and may prompt a bit more discussion, or of course the situation in these contexts may of course change. So there is a slight level of flexibility of co-creation, as Carly nicely put it. But from the questions we were getting in, we felt like for that second work stream, it would be helpful to narrow, as colleagues have said, to focus on contexts where this work seems particularly relevant and aligned to ECW's ongoing country programs and efforts. Brilliant, thank you, Paul. I think perhaps you can stop sharing screen around again now. Just another practical one around the deadline. Yes, it's now the 30th. It will be updated across CCW's socials and website today. But yeah, we are happy to be able to offer that extension. Great. Okay, there's a question about maximum number of consortium members. Carly, Fatu, any response to that one?
I don't think that there is a maximum number, but really knowing how sort of iterative and complex this is envisioned to be, and with one phase building on another, and recognizing that also the intention is to have your consortium, and the consortium itself then funds this community of in-country partners. That will be a lot of relational management and a lot of work to really coordinate across. So I think just as you're thinking about the number of consortium members, be aware of that, be aware of sort of the project management challenges in that and some of the relational issues that can happen in that. And if you are proposing a bigger consortium, I think there's a section in the EOI that sort of asks you for a bit more information about how you would propose to manage the consortium. So just, I would explain a little bit in the EOI about that, especially for those larger consortia.
Thanks, Carly. Brilliant. I'm seeing a couple more questions about eligibility and who's eligible. I think one of the great things about the acceleration facility is that it's very open and inclusive to different types of organisations. So yes, colleagues, you are eligible to apply, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Colleagues, we've had a question about the advocacy workstream and ECW's role as a platform that does advocate strongly for EIE. How engaged will ECW be with supporting that advocacy effort? Fatu, Carly, any reflections on that?
Yeah, on the advocacy piece, well, what we are expecting is like from the work stream and the work that's being done, having a bit of innovative advocacy messages on teachers. We do it, but then the whole point of this RFP is do things differently. But then once we have those messages from the grantees, of course, with our team, we can completely support advocacy because we are, again, a big platform. But still, we expect that the grantees to be also able to be autonomous and do the advocacy on their own. So it's an iterative work, and all throughout this work. And when we were to work, Carly were discussing that we will be co-creating with the grantees. But at the same time, you have to recognize also that it's a small team in ECW, and we cannot take on big pieces. We have a lot of RFPs on teachers, disability, learning outcome. So we have to be mindful of that too. So basically, for the consortium, try to be autonomous on the advocacy, and ECW will be able to support as much as we can and use this ECW platform. Kali, do you want to add something?
The only thing that I would add on that is there is a section of the EOI that asks for the engagement strategy. And I think one of the things that we've seen consistently is that really planning for that engagement for the global report from the start is really critical to getting the momentum around it, to making sure that the messages are taken up. And so I think as part of that, as you propose your engagement strategy and you're interested in sort of, thinking about the role that ECW could play in that, please do feel free to include that as part of it, because I think that's helpful feedback for us. And if the EOI makes it to the next stage, that's something we can discuss in the interview as well.
Thanks, Carly. Yeah, I think I know our comms colleagues would be very excited to share and support the advocacy efforts. And yeah, I think that sort of, it's not just the development of the report or the advocacy product, as I think the questioner asked. It really is thinking about that engagement, that dissemination, as Carly says. So great if you can keep that in mind, and keen to hear innovative ideas. As we say, the AF is about being ambitious and innovative. So keen to hear from you guys how we can sort of make that reach as effective as possible, so that we're not just talking to other fellow advocates for teachers, but this message is getting beyond that. So we really appreciate you taking a look at that. Colleagues, there's another question here around the scope. In the TOR, we talk about teacher professional development, teacher wellbeing, teacher management, school leadership. And there's a question here about, how comprehensive this work should be. Are we covering all areas? I think my sort of reaction to that is that the background report and the advocacy piece, again, we want to be quite comprehensive and look at the full picture, but the country level work will depend on the needs in country, and that's where we narrow in. Would you agree? Carly, Fatu, could you speak to that a little bit more?
Sorry, Charlotte, I didn't get it. I'm sorry about the advocacy and please can you clarify what you were
Yeah,
saying?
sure. It's more about sort of how comprehensive the work should be in terms of covering all of the issues affecting teachers. So not just work stream 3, but all the work streams, because I think we recognise in the TOR that there are significant challenges around management, professional development, well-being, etc. So it's that question. Carly, do you want?
Okay,
You look like you
clear.
read
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think one thing that we are very aware of is sort of ECW's mandate in this work and ECW's sort of value add in crisis context. So for the background report in particular, yes, there's this broad net, I would say, teacher management, teacher well-being, things like that. But in terms of thinking about the promising practices and the solutions, also targeted to, because the part of the background report is oriented to the ECW Secretariat. So thinking about sort of what would be within our remit, within our value add. So some things ECW in terms of broader policy shifts and things like that, that's less of where ECW would tend to focus. So that, I think, keeping that lens of who the audience is can help really narrow down sort of what that focus is. The other thing I would say is that there's different types of evidence, different amounts of evidence that are available for across those different pieces. And so I do think that will guide you in part in thinking about the focus areas that are a part of workstream 1 and 3.
Great, thanks.
And to just add quickly, Charlotte, to add quickly to that, it is that those issues, the whole expectation from ECW is also for the consortium to bring forward what are the biggest, most challenging issues. So it's a bit harder for us. I mean, we know pretty much, but maybe there are some that weight more than others, and then because then this work will go into country in different country setting, then it can bring forward what are the issues the most important where we can now work and click on to move the needle further. So it's a bit harder to now decide what will be the thematics, because that's literally the point of the background report, looking at everything that exists in the space and then look at what are the overarching priorities when you want to support teacher and support teacher well-being. So that is up to the consortium to come with and be a force of proposal to ECW. Thank you.
Thanks, Fatu. Yeah, seeing a couple more practical questions coming in about the consortium and who should be part of that. We're not sort of predetermining who must be a part of that. I think it'll depend on the approach and the work. So yeah, and anybody can be a part of that. And whether you're an INGO or not, or a ministry or not, they're seeing different questions about that. Everybody is welcome to apply for the opportunity, and we leave it up to you to think about the best makeup of that consortium. Having said that, Carly, I'm just wondering if now's the moment to you have created the form. Do you just want to speak to that again in case that's helpful for colleagues?
Sure. So we put together, knowing that some people sort of might have an idea of their consortia already. Some people are more individual organizations that might be joining and looking for partners. So we did put together a Google form for folks who are interested in scoping for partners. So if you are interested, please fill out the Google form. We would recommend one person fill it out per organization. And it really asks you there to identify which work streams you would be particularly interested in, what skill sets or experiences you have that might be relevant. And if you do, the results of that, or the database from that form, would be circulated only to those who actually fill it out and can sort of consent to that information being shared. And with that, you can, if you want to be contacted or contact others to sort of scope around the proposal, then please feel free to do so.
Thanks for that, Carly, and she'll share the link with you. Just a reminder as well about the consortium, what we were saying towards the end of the proposal, the presentation rather, that that we do want to see the different strengths and expertise as set in the TOR, including that gender expertise. That will certainly be something that we look for. So do keep that in mind as you're forming your consortiums. Colleagues, I'm conscious we only have a few minutes left. I'm seeing a couple more practical things about HACT assessment, just again to say that the hack doesn't need to be in place when you're doing your expression of interest. That can be something that we do with the successful candidate as they're working on the full proposal. So please don't let that stop you from applying for this opportunity. I'm still seeing questions about the country selection. So just a reminder that work streams 1 and 3 are broad in scope and can draw on the work happening in any of the countries in which ECW is active. And for work stream 2, it's that shorter list. And I suggest, as well as putting it on the website, that we email you all after this directly with that updated information. It will hopefully make it much clearer. And heartfelt apologies to those of you doing amazing work in contexts that aren't where ECW is active. We do have to try and narrow and prioritise, and there's a sort of a lot of thinking behind it on these specific contexts, which are sort of seen as priority needs. So thank you for your understanding, and we certainly hope that there are other opportunities for other contexts out there as well. There is also a question about follow-up questions. Yes, we have an RFP inbox that we check regularly and respond to. So please send any additional questions there. We'll collate all the questions today in an FAQ document on the website. So if you missed anything, you can refer back to that, and we'll keep that live. So as things come in on the email, we'll add it to that FAQ document on the website. We are also going to do another webinar in January. So if you have new questions emerging then, we can also answer them then. I'm conscious questions are still coming in, so we will collate those as well to be part of the FAQ document. But before we wrap up, I just want to hand back over to Fatu and Carly. Any final points you'd like to make for colleagues on the call?
No, I mean, I think that just we're really excited about this proposal and this work, and really excited to hear all of your ideas. We know that the people on this call have such tremendous experience and diverse experience. And so really looking forward to working with you and co-creating on this, and excited to see what comes in.
Thanks, Carly. Fatu.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much for being here, and like the turnaround for this webinar is amazing. And I hope that we have time, have nice holidays, and then get us those proposals so that we can really start the co-creation. And we are really committed to this and committed to make a difference on teachers in EIPC and on teacher voices. So thank you so much, and looking forward.
Thanks, Fatu, and thanks both for sharing your expertise today. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your flexibility with the issues yesterday. Thanks for joining us today. Stay in touch, and thank you for your interest in this work. We know you're doing incredible things, so we look forward to working